Good morning, everybody. It's May 11th, 2026. A US Air Force F-35A Lightning II over the Gulf of Oman, flying in the same airspace where basically this war started and where it will either end or explode back to life. It was squawking 7700. That's the Universal Aviation Emergency squawk code, and you type it into your cockpit if you're having some sort of issue and you want an immediate return. You want to be able to be let into airspace without any friction because your jet has an issue and you need to land immediately. It looks like, from looking at all the different images that we've seen, this jet turned hard toward UAE's airspace, briefly visible on Flight Radar 24, then its transponder went completely dark, which is very interesting. Within minutes, Iranian state media is screaming about it. Obviously, they're never gonna miss an opportunity. Their post on X was, "We shot it down." Yeah, congratulations, you shot it down, and the fighter pilot had time to just squawk 7700 and basically highlight himself to the entire Gulf, basically standing out like a you-know-what in sweatpants. And fighter pilots, we know this, if you're in combat and you take battle damage, you don't reach up and broadcast your position on a transponder. But of course, the Iranian propaganda machine is going to go into full effect because that's what they do. They grift the world, they grift us, and this is no exception. And the consulate general in India went on to say, Project Freedom is collapsing and America is hiding losses. Yeah, And so to hide our losses, we're going to squawk 7700. Yeah, good connection there, Mr. Consulate General. Do you hang out with General Salami right now? I could literally see the Consulate General and General Salami just sitting around like, oh, we should just say that we shot down an F-35 today. And he's like, oh, General Salami, you are a genius. Here's what I want you to know before we go any deeper. Iran's oil storage clock, an Iranian oil ministry official told the New York Times this week that it's about 40 days from running out completely, with some well closures potentially permanent after that time. And then at the same time, it looks like as of today, as of this morning, ceasefire talks have just collapsed. Trump called Iran's counter proposal totally unacceptable after Tehran demanded war reparations. Yeah, we're going to send you a check for all those different naval assets that were just destroyed. Yeah, I'm sure that's going to happen, Iran. But again, they're trying to grift us, and they also want full sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz. So what does that mean? They're basically saying, we want to break international law because you're only allowed to have 13 miles off your coast. Strait of Hormuz is 21 miles wide. So Iran's like, look, we just want to break international law and be gangsters and be the mafia of the Strait of Hormuz, and you need to just accept that. That's what they're telling the entire world, and they're surprised that no one's accepting that deal. They also want sanctions relief, they want assets unfrozen, and all of that is likely tied to what's said to be 440 kilograms of highly enriched uranium that the UN nuclear agency confirms Iran is likely sitting on right now. So that's a short technical step away from weapons-grade uranium. And Iran's like, no, we don't want to bargain with the two things that you actually care about, the uranium and the Strait of Hormuz. Yeah, very interesting bargaining position, Iran. And Iran needed a victory in the information space. And so on May 10th, they say they got one with what the F-35 was squawking, 7700. But I flew the F-15 Eagle into combat. I know exactly what 7700 means in a cockpit, what it doesn't mean, and what decision you go through if you're going to actually squawk that. So today we're going to break down what likely happened with the F-35, what it was almost certainly doing over the Gulf of Oman in the first place, and what those F-35s might be preparing for, since now we know that Iran's not going to come to the table with the Strait of Hormuz or with the nuclear uranium enrichment deal. So what happens if this conflict kicks back off? Well, F-35s are likely going to be at the center of that. We're going to dig into the Iranian air defense system as well and what they're likely thinking as these F-35s, F-15Es potentially prep to go back in and crush Iran's IADS, their integrated air defense systems. And then we'll talk about the kill chain from F-35 sensors, F-15E GBU-72s, striking coastal missile batteries, to Apache Hellfires, to Super Hornets. We'll talk about all those different systems and how those would be used if the massive boat swarm, the drone swarm, comes at the US, if the US goes back in and starts to crush the IADS. We did this yesterday and you guys loved it from what you told me. So we're going to do another global roundup, and we're going to talk about the main topics and stories going on around the entire globe. So stick around for that. So in a fighter jet, you don't wait until the radar warning light comes on to know what threats are trying to shoot you down. You know to prepare for it before the threat shows up. Same principle applies ties to your savings. I mean, look at what we've uncovered on this channel. Iran mining the Strait of Hormuz, markets swinging on a single X post, record national debt with no end in sight, and somehow the S&P 500 is still partying like it's 1999. That doesn't exactly pass the sniff test. So I did what any good fighter pilot does before a mission. I got educated. That's how I found Lear Capital. Here's what I learned. Physical gold and silver aren't just shiny rocks. They're the one asset that can't be printed, can't go bankrupt, and has outperformed the stock market for decades. You hold it in your hand, you're in complete control. It's a real hard asset. And here's the part I didn't know. You can move part of your IRA or 401k directly into physical metals. Lear is an education-first company, and they will walk you through any questions you have. No pressure, no sales pitch, just information. And they have a 24-hour risk-free purchase guarantee. Also, Lear was just named the best overall gold IRA company by Consumer Affairs. To get educated, call 800-411-2430, or you can go to my link, maxforlear.com, for their free guide. So don't wait for that warning light to come on, because at that point, the missile's already in the air. Give Lear a call today. So let's talk about the operational picture here. So we know Project Freedom ran for a while, and then a pause was put on that. There's a full naval blockade of all these Iranian ports, and Iran's likely getting a little bit anxious at this point. CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper confirmed on May 4th that U.S. forces have, quote, an enormous amount of capability and firepower concentrated in and around the Strait. Two carrier strike groups, USS Abraham Lincoln and USS H.W. Bush, they're operating in the Gulf of Oman. That's approximately 200 aircraft, 20 warships. The blockade on Iranian ports has been in effect since April 13th. So the squeeze is really hitting them hard, especially when it comes to those oil wells. And then per CENTCOM, more than 70 tankers carrying over 166 million barrels of Iranian oil have been blocked from movement. And it's hard to state how important that is to the Iranian regime, because when you think of the mullahs, you think of the political class, what have they done for decades? They pay off lower level mafia bosses underneath them to keep themselves in power. So now, them not being able to pay those mafia bosses off as well, when those mafia bosses see a zero in their bank account for the month, when they were used to seeing 20,000, 50,000, whatever it was that they were being paid off with, they're going to get a little bit nervous. And at this point, we're also seeing reports that from Artesh, that's the normal army from Iran, but they were the army from the Shah. They were sent to some of the front lines during the initial conflict with what's said to be 10 bullets, and they were just cannon fodder sent to their death by the IRGC. And so the IRGC is trying to use Artesh as human shields and cannon fodder, and Artesh is kind of like, hey, why are you doing that? I guess we're not actually in the fold. We're not actually part of the cool kids club. So will that actually create fractures and different factions of the normal army from Iran that maybe wants to go up against the IRGC? That could be something that we're seeing as this money dries up. And that kind of leads into some 4D chess stuff, which we'll do at the end. And the ceasefire talks collapsed. That's no surprise, right? It was immediately rejected because it didn't address the two main things that actually matter in this conflict. And then we've got the F-35A squawking 7,700 over the Gulf of Oman, likely going towards Al Dhafra Air Base. That's the main US Air Force hub for Operation Epic Fury. And then its transponder goes dark. Standard procedure when a military aircraft lands at an operational base is for the transponder to be turned off. So was it just landing, or was it going somewhere else besides Al Dhafra? We don't know exactly, but in my opinion, here's what I think was one of the main causes of this. So these aircraft are being run hard. They're doing missions every single day. Maintainers are busting their you-know-whats to get these things airborne. They're doing everything they can. But at the end of the day, this is still a massive air war. There are still so many assets in the region, all these different wheels turning, all these different radars going out there, checking out what Iran is doing along the coast. That's one of the biggest things, is getting that F-35 radar up there around the coast to see where these fast attack boat swarms are, where they're staying, where they're keeping them, what warehouses they're in, are they being kept underground? And then also coastal-based missiles. So you got to be aware of those coastal-based missiles like the NOR 802, that's that Chinese derivative that you really can't play around with. So you need these F-35s up there airborne with advanced drones like the RQ-4 Global Hawk. Even if we could rush the Anduril Fury into theater, get that thing up there with its advanced sensors along with the AI XBAT. You guys know I love these things. The reason why is because the advanced sensors could be great for ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance along that coastline, just trusting but verifying. Yeah, Iran, yeah, we trust you. We're sure that you're not bringing in surface-to-air missiles from other countries. We're sure that you're not ramping up and getting all of your drones focused and centered on the Strait of Hormuz, but we just want to verify that. They're like that guy at the party that's just like stuffing food into his coat, and you're like, hey man, yeah, we can all see what you're doing. We're all watching you right here. And he's like, huh, me? Not me. But now let's talk about the Iranian capability that is actually shot at, and they actually released footage of what they said was their missiles hitting an F-35. But we know they were able to hit an F-15E with the shoot down, with that amazing rescue operation going in and taking out hundreds of commandos from the IRGC. The best of the best is what they sent to that operation, and their best of the best went bye-bye, just standing there holding a pair of underwear that Special Forces left behind. But Sun Tzu says, know your enemy and know yourself. So let's talk about Iran's air threat, clearly not dismissively, because dismissing them is exactly how you get surprised. When you dismiss the enemy, when you think there's no threat, that's when you get blindsided and things go poorly. So Iran's long-range integrated air defenses are the S-300 batteries, the domestic Bavar 373. They've been largely destroyed and suppressed by US and Israeli SEAD operations, suppression of enemy air defenses for you acronym lovers. And that is not the whole threat picture, though. Iran's answer to losing the high-end fight was to go low-tech, mobile, and passive. The system that they claimed to have targeted the F-35 with in March was the Majid, also designated the AD-08, produced by Iran's defense industry organization. It debuted at a military parade in April of 2021, and here's why it is slightly capable and you can't discount it. The Majid is a short-range point defense system with a roughly 5 to 7 nautical mile engagement range, and it also has a 2 to 3 nautical mile ceiling, so somewhere up to about 18,000 feet. So it's not nothing. And here's the thing that is really surprising about it. It mounts on mobile Aras-2 tactical vehicles for rapid repositioning. And that's the big thing. These things can literally be anywhere. They can climb up on a hillside and they can fire from being up at altitude. So if they're up on a 7,000 foot mountain, they just increase their reach by 7,000 feet. And also it doesn't use a radar. That's the big thing. And that's what we're seeing with some of these different images put out by the IRGC. It looks like it uses some sort of a passive imaging infrared homing guidance system. Could be also some elements of heat seeking. It could track the infrared signature that an engine puts out, but it doesn't broadcast any radar signal that would trigger a radar warning receiver so you wouldn't hear it coming, which is very unfortunate. And at that point, stealth doesn't really matter, because if they're using electro-optical sensors, and some of those have been said to potentially have been upgraded by China. China upgrading Iran's sensors. Yeah, we never saw that one coming. And there's more cargo flights supposedly coming in from China. I'm sure it's just Temu deliveries. China, thank you so much for the Temu and for the fireworks. You're just setting up for a celebration once the free people of Iran take control, right? But CENTCOM did confirm in March that a US Air Force F-35A was hit, but we don't know what it was hit by. It could have been Iranian fire. There's also situations right now while ballistic missiles are being intercepted, and I've heard this from the front lines of combat. When you intercept those things, it basically rains down melting hot metal debris all over the airspace. There's been fighter pilots reporting they'll go out on these flights and it literally looks like the sky is falling with the amount of missiles that were intercepted, especially during the early parts of the conflict when that F-35 took hits. So did it take some hits from a ballistic missile, from some of the shards coming down from that, some of the shrapnel coming down, melting shrapnel? That's not going to do very well versus a jet engine. So was that what hit it, or was one of these electro-optical weapons what Iran was able to get a lucky shot on the F-35 with? That pilot in that first shot of the F-35 made an emergency landing and is in stable condition. But there's a lot of analysts out there that have attributed the hit to that Majid or a similar passive IR system. The key here is the F-35's radar cross-section is tiny, literally smaller than the size of a mosquito, and stealth can defeat a radar easy. Boom, that's what it does perfectly. But it doesn't defeat heat seekers at low altitude necessarily. The structural vulnerability in Iran's doctrine goes beyond the Majid, though. Their entire swarm concept, drones, fast boats, shore-based missiles, they all depend on command and control. But you can get some of those missiles that are detached from command and control and just get a lucky shot. But they're much more capable when they're actually connected to the command and control that Iran has. Iran also can't sustain a war of attrition in the Strait for a long period of time, especially once their oil wells dry up. Now, obviously this is taking a lot longer than anybody would have hoped for, but when they had close to 1,000 of those fast attack boats, thousands of drones, ballistic missiles. You add all that together, and this is a tough problem. And then Iran is trying to use those electro-optical sensor missiles to take down any jets that might be in the area. But it looks like their logistics chain is breaking faster than their propaganda AI wing when their propaganda AI wing puts out their next Lego video. Because the AN/ASQ electric warfare suite, that's on the F-35, along with that massive radar, literally up there just watching and detecting, being the stage 5 clinger for Iran at this point.
Jeremy. Jeremy, you're amazing!
Oh God, I think you're amazing.
You made it to the global roundup, my friends, and it's time to get a full breakdown of what's going on around the globe. So here we go. France's only aircraft carrier, the FS Charles de Gaulle, crossed the Suez Canal this week and is transiting toward the southern Red Sea and Gulf of Aden. The French Ministry of Defense stated the carrier group is positioning for a future freedom of navigation operation in the Strait of Hormuz. Interesting. Okay, so there might be something else that's in the works. That's not an advisory deployment though, so it looks like there is some actual action behind what they could do. So it is nice to see that France is stepping into the fight. They're not just behind the scenes setting up the buffet and the crumpets and the wine for the US Navy when they're done doing the job. They're actually putting some hard metal behind this. So the coalition looks to be getting bigger, not smaller, while Iran's options are growing narrower. That's a good thing. And then check this out. China is doing some homework right now. While Hormuz is dominating the headlines, China is intensifying South China Sea and Taiwan naval activity just this week, including a PLA, People's Liberation Army Navy spy ship confirmed operating inside the West Philippine Sea during US-Philippine Balikatan 26 exercises. So literally spying on the US and Philippine exercises. Are we surprised? China's like, oh, we're your friend. No, we were just there to back you up just in case something went wrong. We had life preservers just in case something went wrong with the naval exercises. We had rescue boats. We were there for you. Meanwhile, you just see these big, like massive cameras and telescopes just scoping out all the US equipment. And then the last global roundup story, US Army this week fielded a high-power vehicle-mounted laser system designed specifically for counter-drone operations. Directed energy has been a testbed priority since the Houthi drone campaign proved that intercepting cheap one-way attack drones with expensive missiles is an unsustainable cost ratio. $30,000 drone, $1 million AMRAAM. $30,000 drone, $500,000 AIM-9X. Yeah, not the best way to go economically. I mean, I'm not a genius financially, and even I can figure that one out. But a laser that reloads at the speed of electricity and costs less than $1 per shot fundamentally changes the economics of drone warfare. And hats off to the Army. We need this in theater in the Middle East as soon as possible. This is early fielding, not full deployment, but it's on the timeline, which is great. And that brings us to the 4D chess strategic analysis section. What was that F-35 actually doing over the Strait of Hormuz? Well, one of the big things is just getting all the different targeting data for where these fast attack boats are. If you get that targeting data, my mind from a 4D chess strategic analysis perspective says get as many of the locations as you can, and before they leave the ports, just carpet bomb them with B-52s, B-1s, F-15Es, dropping GBU-72s. Those are those massive weapons that can go down and penetrate deep. Even if they're hiding these things underground, now you have the ability to strike them where it really hurts, and also take out the command and control nodes of whatever is controlling assets in the Strait of Hormuz. That's huge. You do that while these oil wells are drying up, still likely 40 days for those to fully dry up, and now you've put pressure on the regime that they really can't escape. But it seems pretty nihilistic at this point, like the regime doesn't even want an off-ramp at all, and they're willing to just sacrifice themselves for what they think is going to keep them in power. What do you think happens from here? Do you think we see this 4D chess strategic analysis section go live here in the next few days with renewed strikes on these fast boats? Would love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. I read every comment, especially those within 2 hours of the video releasing, so definitely leave a comment below. Would love to hear what you have to say. Follow me on X, follow me on Instagram. I'm posting there pretty much every day. And then join the Max Ready Room. Click the link in the description. You get access to members only videos that I think you'll love. And then watch this next video that pops up right here. This is Ryan, also known as Max Afterburner, signing off. And then in other breaking news, France has sent their one and only aircraft carrier. Talk about fashionably late. Better late than never, right? At this point, the conflict's pretty much over, and they're showing up to take a group photo. And in other breaking news, France is rolling up with an aircraft carrier like, don't worry guys, we brought the big guns. And by the way, big guns, I mean fresh croissants and a really strong cheese plate, because And France is showing up with 3 options: the white flag with butter, and white flag with chocolate. Warfare? Nah. Pastries? Michelin star. It's kind of like France showed up to the Strait of Hormuz barbecue at 11:45 p.m. with a single baguette and some mustard going, "Hey, what'd we miss? Bro, the grill's already cold. Iran and America already fought over the last few months and you're still trying to set up a fancy folding table." Oh man, alright, this might be too much.